Hello there guys, welcome to part 2 of this video. Oh, I'm so excited. So, first things first, let's talk about Winterhaven. If you guys haven't seen the part 1 of this video, where I basically look through all of these different products to kind of combine them all and turn this into a really interesting low-level adventure you can run for your players, then please do go back, take a look at that. I just basically give the book a quick flick through. That way you understand a little bit more what is going on in this book and the changes that I'm suggesting you make. It's not essential, but I do recommend it. So, in that video, I recommended combining it with Cairn of the Winter King. The only really big change you have to make, I'll be doing a video talking about how to run Cairn of the Winter King, because this is the map for that adventure. It is big and it is terrifying, and you only have a poster map for this section right here. So I'm going to be doing a separate video for how to simply run Cairn of the Winter King for a higher level party. And the only change you need to make to this adventure right here is to make it so that Winterhaven is kind of in the middle of a localized Ice Age. Now, first things first, that makes this entire thing super easy to introduce to your players. Why have your players gone to Winterhaven? Well, quite simply, the local lord has called for aid. There have been murders and a string of murders within Winterhaven. Not to mention winter has not ended in Winterhaven. It is still frozen and frosty, and it is causing havoc, whereas crops should now be growing. Nobody can do anything. It is terrible. Nobody can stop it, and nobody understands why this is happening. Not to mention, there is potential cult activity in the area. There are 3 brilliant hooks to get your players right into the meat of this adventure. Now, we're going to be cutting loads out of this book. We're going to be trimming this right up to make it super simple for you to run. So, here's what I recommend. Page 18 and 19 is all about Winterhaven. This is your bread and butter. Any encounter within Winterhaven, these are your notes finished. Like, this is everything you need. Now, we can couple this, right, with a brilliant use of the burial map. Now, I previously suggested that we have a string of murders happening in Winterhaven. The reason being is because I think that is a more interesting way of getting your players involved in the game than, oh, there's a kobold attack and there's a few kobold ambushes, and that's very cliche for anyone who's played D&D for a while. So what I recommend is actually skipping to the interlude on page 60 and 61. Now, this recommends that you use the burial map, which is a poster map within this adventure. And basically what's happened is that the dead have started to rise. Now, we can make this more interesting because the main sort of culprit for all of this happening is an elven archer called Ninaran. Now, Ninaran works for Cathedral the Vile, who is the main antagonist, of the adventure. And Cathedral is a cultist, he is a necromancer, he is totally evil, and to me, it makes sense that Cathedral will want to cause issues in Winterhaven. So, a string of murders that are being performed by Ninaran is super interesting. So, one thing we can do is have Ninaran killing people in order to use their skin as basically the cover of spell books for Cathedral and his cult. She is trying to infiltrate Cathedral's cult, and as a result, she is basically being told to murder on his behalf. Now this is dark, dark subject matter right here. This is not an adventure that I recommend playing for children, because this can go really creepy and mysterious and Call of Cthulhu-like if you wanted to. However, in order for her to gain access to Calorel's cult, she is having to kill people and take their flesh to a tanner. And you can make the name up of this tanner yourself. I'm just going to call him Mr. Baker for now. But she is taking the skin to Mr. Baker, who is also part of this cult, working mysteriously within Winterhaven to make these books. And as soon as adventurers come into Winterhaven in order to discover what is going on, people who can't be bribed and manipulated, people who are stronger than your average town guard, well, she goes to Calorel, and Ninaran learns a ritual that she needs to raise the dead within this graveyard. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so we can take a look at that map. So you can see right there that all these S's are skeletons right here. These are skeletal hounds, and that N right in there is Ninaran's location on that map. So that is how I recommend you start this adventure. That is far more interesting, in my opinion, than there's a few kobold ambushes. Now, Ninaran knows a secret passphrase to get into the second level of the Keep on the Shadowfell. And that passphrase is "from the ground some magic was found." Sorted. Done and done. We now have a ton of information that we can give to our players, and there is session 1 of your adventure sorted. A simple 3 to 4 hour long campaign session, a lot of role playing involved, a lot of cool antics happening. Right there, there's session 1. So that is my first recommendation. Now, your players have defeated Ninaran. They've destroyed the skeletal minions and the skeletons within that grounds. It's a tough fight. Maybe they have some city guard to help them, but they get through it. They interrogate Ninaran. Maybe they kill her outright and find notes on her body. They realise that there's a cult working in Shadowfell Keep. They followed the clues through the tanner. They got to Ninaran. Now they've gone to Shadowfell Keep. Now what? Well, this right here is an absolute mess. There's too much going on. If you guys have seen my video talking about the Sunless Citadel, I recommended reading through these rooms and cutting the ones you don't like. That is exactly what I recommend doing in this one, guys. So I've actually taken the liberty of doing this for you guys, right? Now, we are talking about a death cult here, right? So let's go through this and let's simplify this. Area 1 is a goblin guard room. I don't like the idea of goblins being here, but you can definitely have this as a goblin guard room. Maybe the cultists have manipulated local goblins into working for them. Sure, that works. Let's have that as part of a plot. So you can keep this room as is, leave the pit trap even. I chose to make this entire section just a simple respite for the players. They've come into the keep. This is the only real safe place within the keep. It's a place where I can really focus on the atmosphere of these lower runes. Okay, next up is Area 2. That is the torture chamber. Okay, well, we have a lot of goblins here. Goblin warriors, hobgoblin torturers. And we also have a captured goblin who can basically act as a companion for your players, named Splug. Let's just zoom in on Splug's information by there. So I love Splug because Splug actually makes an appearance in Acquisitions Incorporated as Splugoth the Returned. So Splug is awesome, but in this room, what I recommend is taking out all of the goblins. We are dealing with a death cult here. Why are there so many goblins? It's the issue that I have with goblins is that they're very cliche. They're your typical low level, like party encounter. I would keep the Hobgoblin Torturer. Hobgoblin Torturer sounds pretty cool. You can just use a regular Hobgoblin stat block for that. I would then put in Cultists. Simple Cultists, or if your players are a high enough level, Cult Fanatics. Those work really well. And I put about 4 of those in. So then you have the same number of creatures and enemies in here. Splug is a really interesting character. He can explain why there were goblins at the front entrance. So that is a really cool encounter. I like it a lot. Okay, Area 3, the mass burial site. Oh, I'd get rid of it personally. The reason being is because this, without a map, this entire adventure, this entire campaign actually, can feel a lot like a dungeon crawl. And it's only certain groups that work well with that. So my recommendation would be to replace these with something a little bit more devastating, a little bit terrifying, and that is shadows. I've talked about shadows on this channel before. You can take a look at that video. I tell you why shadows are absolutely brilliant and one of my favourite monsters in D&D. But I recommend putting shadows in this room. Think about it. You've got this dark burial crypt. Maybe you have bones thrown into this chamber from people that the cult has killed. And yeah, I love the idea that maybe a shadow lingers or 2 shadows linger here. This turns this really simple, boring encounter into a life or death situation and really makes players earn whatever loot they have from it. Now this is the Chieftains Lair. First thing I would do with this Area 4, I would simplify this room. Instead of having multiple little rooms, you might as well just have 1 or 2 chambers. This is a lot of different rooms and there's a lot going on. My reason for doing that is this is really difficult to draw on a poster map. This is really difficult to lay out in dungeon tiles. I would take your time and simplify this room, make it a lot easier for yourselves. And I would put cultists in here. I would put cultists in here, and I would have Balgrog the Fat, as instead of a goblin, as a really large cultist. Maybe even he has the statistics of a mage, if your players are a high enough level. Maybe it's a fight they have to earn. Who knows? I don't know what level your party is. I don't know what group you're running. I don't know if you're a sadistic DM that loves to put really challenging encounters at your players. But my recommendation, what I'm going to run for my group, is I'm going to be running 8 cultists that are minions. It means that they have 1 hit point. They have a few spells that they can use, but they have 1 hit point. If they take 1 hit, they are dead. And I'm going to put Balgrog the Fat in there, and I'm going to have him as a really fat cultist, firing spells left, right and centre, but he's a big coward at heart. So simplify this room, throw a few more cultists in there. You really get that culty theme then, the sort of like the occult and that kind of whole vibe. I think that's what's missing with this Keep on the Shadowfell adventure, is it feels like it's going to be one of those from the start, but it's just not. So simplify this room, add some cultists, get rid of those goblins, you'll be fine. Okay, Area 5, Crypt of the Shadows. Right, now, you guys are going to learn something about me. The first one, I am running this adventure for a high level party. The group that is going into this adventure, they're pretty tough. They're a good group. They've been playing for about 2 years with the same characters in some cases. I am not running zombies in this Crypt of Shadows. The idea of this room is that there is a load of zombies that come running through these twisting corridors, and it's terrifying, right? I'll zoom in a little bit on this map for you to see what I mean. So these 2 rooms are filled with zombies. If you want to make this encounter a lot more dangerous, fill these rooms with ghouls instead. Okay, because ghouls are able to paralyze their prey, and that is going to make this super dangerous. These corridors are completely dark, pitch black, and if they step on one of these traps, it lets off a scream and possibly scares the player, but also calls all of these creatures to the player's location. How do we make this encounter a little bit better? Get rid of the map. No map. Just have it as a skill check challenge. Maybe they have to roll 3 investigation checks and succeed before 3 failures. Every time they have a failure, or perception check, or whatever you want, every time they have a failure, they accidentally step on one of these, and all of a sudden, ghouls or skeletons or zombies come running through the halls at them. It means that they can't see an end in sight. Because you haven't tried drawing a map, they can't just be like, yeah, I'm going to go left, then right, then up, and then down. So that is my recommendation for that. Get rid of the map. Make it a skill check challenge. Have one person leading the party and really focus in on the horror aspect. This should feel terrifying because they could die. They could genuinely lose a member of the party in that section, right? It is not fun. So, as well as that, we also have a hidden armory within that maze. I would just give them the hidden armory. I would do the riddle, but I would get rid of the 4 zombies being there. So, don't make it an encounter. What this adventure does quite a lot is it makes this entire thing an encounter. So, just simplify it. Just don't make it an encounter. It's easy peasy. Okay, Area 7, the Skeletal Legion. I actually really like this section of the adventure. Yeah, I mean, like what I've done is I've made these guys skeletal knights instead of just basic skeletons. Again, like what you can do is look up skeletons in the 5e stat blocks, okay, and then increase their armor class by 2, and that sort of accounts for them having a shield. So I think their armor class normally is 14. So increase it to 16, and now they are knights. They've got a shield, they've got some armor. And potentially increase their to hit bonus. So their to hit bonus is usually +4 for skeletons. This is just going off the top of my head, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. Maybe increase that to a +6, because they're a bit better trained, or they were in life, and in depth they are. And then you have a really difficult encounter going on here. You don't just have a group of skeletons in this hallway that are just no good at fighting. What I recommend doing, though, is keeping the minions as part of a thing. So minions work really simply, is that they have a regular creature's stat block, but they only have 1 hit point. So if you deal any damage to them, they die. Now, that means that they can still attack, they can still do loads of damage to players, but it means the players just end up wading through them. And that's great. That's what we want. We want that. So we want your players to feel like badasses carving through this corridor of undead. And eventually making it to Sir Keegan's tomb. Sir Keegan's tomb should be a role-play encounter. But to make Sir Keegan a little bit more epic, what I would do is keep him as like a skeleton, like an undead figure. But I would keep his armor class at 20. I would keep it really high, because Sir Keegan should not be a fight for your players. And if your players do fight him, they should be leveling up after it, because this guy is tough. So it is just him in the room. He has like 325 hit points according to this stat block right here. I'm actually going to show you the 4th edition stat block so you can you can gauge for yourselves whether he is a fight that they should be taking on. So of course these use 4th edition mechanics, but I would keep the health and the arm class the same. Maybe give him some of the skeletons attacks. I mean, he's a tough fight, even if you convert it all to 5th edition. Yeah, guys, I mean, but Sir Keegan should not be an easy fight. They should not want to fight Sir Keegan, unless you're running a party of murder hobos, I suppose. But hey, it's all in the role-playing, right? And this is a really awesome role-playing encounter. Keep it as it is. Okay, Area 9. Area 9 and Area 10. Take them out. These here add nothing to this entire game that you can't live without. Even the treasure you can take and add at the end of the adventure to make it feel more rewarding at the end. Area 11, personally, unless you are an experienced DM, I would take out as well. If you have a bit of experience DMing, what I recommend is actually including an OBE Lex or a gelatinous cube into this bit. During the course of level 1 of this sort of area, your players should have leveled up a few times if they clear out every room. But putting an OBE Lex in here is pretty cool. If you don't know what an OBE Lex is, then look it up. It is a super cool D&D monster that basically is like an ooze or a slime, but it can like replicate people's... It basically eats their memories and then uses the memories to recreate people. Super weird, but it has a really awesome background to how the monster became created, and it's absolutely fab. I highly recommend it. We haven't got long left of this video, guys. We're coming towards the end now. We're going into level 2, and what I've actually done with level 2 is I've simplified it a whole lot. I'll show you what I mean, right? Okay, Area 12, Area 13, and Area 14, take them out. You don't need them. All they are is just encounter after encounter after encounter. Guys, I've already said this... You don't need this in your game. You can remove this. Yeah, I mean, it's... You really don't need it. Oh, sorry. And Area 15. Take that out as well. You want to actually get to Area 16 as soon as you go to level 2. Why? Because this is where we can use the passphrase from the start of the game. Do you remember I said Ninaran had a passphrase to get to level 2? Well, if your party, for whatever reason, decide to head to the Keep on the Shadowfell without defeating Ninaran, then they encounter this room. They leave Ninaran. They're like, don't worry about those murders happening in town. We're just going to head straight to the keep that we know our DM wants us to head into, and we're going to try fighting our way all the way down to the basement levels. And they do, and then they get to this room. And this room is horrible. There are loads of traps in here. Now, you can make up these traps however you want. I'm running this level, this adventure for a higher level party. So the damage that I have for these traps is not what I recommend you have it. You could have these doing like 1d12, casting firebolt, and then the room slowly filling with water from the water traps. But I would have a passphrase deactivate all of these traps. And that passphrase is from the ground some magic was found. So to simplify this room, you could have these traps going off, and then to stop the water rising and suffocating everybody, they have to say that passphrase. So that is an interesting one. Or to open these doors, I should say. Not to stop the water rising, but to open these doors, they have to say the passphrase. Otherwise, they're trapped in this trap room. So, firebolt for low-level parties, fireball for high-level parties. I would say maybe 1d12 slashing damage in a 15-foot radius for low-level parties. And then for high-level parties, you could go as high as like 3d12. And then these statues right here filling the room with water slowly, so it becomes difficult terrain, and eventually they have to use their swim speed. That could be really interesting. And then to open the doors, to stop all the traps, they have to use the passphrase. Otherwise, they have to deactivate the traps. That's an interesting room. And then Area 17, the Ghoul Warrens. I mean, you guys know I love my ghouls, so I've put some zombie minions in here, and I think instead of putting 12 zombies, then 2 regular zombies, then a clay scout, and then a ghoul in here. This is a perfect opportunity to put a zombie beholder in. I mean, or like an eye tyrant or something like that. I mean, okay, this is an adventure for low-level adventurers, I get it. Maybe you don't want to throw something like that crazy at them, but guys, I mean, what your party will be thinking when they go into this room and see a dead beholder, maybe it's lost a few eye rays, maybe it's weakened from the fight, half its HP, half the amount of eye rays it has, but they see this undead beholder floating there in the middle of the room, they are going to wet themselves. This is going to be such a cool dungeon to put in front of players who've never played before. They're going to find out what a beholder is in the best possible way by fighting one. Okay, it's an undead one, that the main bad guy of the adventure has risen from the dead. That's pretty cool. Now, what's really great about this is because we've cut so many rooms, you can add some rooms in. If you found some traps or some encounters that you really like, add them in. You might even, your players might have missed a few of the rooms in level 1. Take those rooms and put them into level 2. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Easy peasy. Super, super cool. We then get into the 2 most useful rooms in the entire game. That right here is the Cathedral and the Shadow Rift room. So, we are 26 minutes into this video, guys. I'm going to try and speed up through this bit. With the Cathedral, I recommend keeping these as is. You might actually want to only have a few vampire spawn in here. Just have a mage as the Orcus Underpriest. Just use the mage statistics. You guys will, or like a cult fanatic or something for the Orcus Underpriest. And you guys will have a really interesting encounter. What's really useful about a room like this is you need to make the most out of these beautiful terrain pieces. These crystals, maybe they stop magic working at a certain distance. Maybe they amplify magic. The blood on the floor, any creature standing in the blood on the floor loses health. Who knows, like this kind of stuff is... I mean, it leaves a lot open for the DM to use. So I recommend changing something like that, making a few tweaks, use some interesting vampire stats, you'll be good to go. And finally, the Shadow Rift. I mean, what to recommend? First things first, you don't want to go... You might want to use a white. I'd get rid of skeletons. Your party's probably fought enough skeletons by now. You may want to throw a few cultists in there to spice things up. You may even want to include a few of those whites, just the general white stat blocks from 5th edition. This specific encounter, I recommend watching Matt Koval's video, guys. I'm not going to go giving you advice that... I mean, I don't think I can give you better advice for this specific encounter, but he talks about it in a few of his different videos. I think specifically he talks about it when he talks about the Keep on the Shadowfell. If you don't know who Matt Koval is, highly recommend going and watching him. He's a really, really great YouTuber. But he talks about this encounter in particular. He doesn't talk about the rest of the dungeon, but he talks about this encounter in particular, and I don't want to go repeating the advice that he has given, because I plan on running this encounter as he recommends. So what I would do, guys, is I would go and watch his video. He talks about how he alters Calaril, the Scion of Orcus, to make him a little bit more dangerous. Some of the abilities that he gives Calaril. He also talks about this portal and how he works the portal a little bit more, and how he uses the portal as a tool. What I recommend doing potentially is maybe having the blood on the floor as being, again, this, if your players enter the blood, they kind of, maybe they take some necrotic damage. If Calaril enters the blood, maybe he regains hit points at the start of his turn. I mean, these are all things that I'm just coming up with on the spot, but I'm pretty sure sitting down and thinking about this will give you some really great tools that you can use. And with that, guys, that marks the end of this module. That is how I recommend running Keep on the Shadowfell. I'll be doing another video talking specifically about how I run the Cairn of the Winter King at another date. But what I recommend, guys, is I highly recommend trimming this dungeon down, making it less of an encounter-based dungeon where you're fighting fight after fight after fight. Make it more roleplay based. Add those horror and fear elements. Get rid of those goblins at the beginning of the game. Put in some really awesome badass encounters with some cultists. Cultists are great and so underappreciated. Hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. I hope this is going to be so helpful to you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.